Right, I'm not going to make any apologies for constantly running old B-roll. I've not got an awful lot of choice at the moment. Despite that, I will try to make this video as interesting as possible while I'm running this footage for the YSS rear shock absorbers that I reviewed a few months ago. Before we get started, and whilst we're on that subject, I do still have the adjustable front fork spring kit for this bike, for the Interceptor 650. I have been holding off with it because obviously a test ride once the modifications have been made is going to be impossible at the moment. But as these current problems are probably set to last for quite some time, I will in the next couple of weeks get that video done, a sort of a show and tell, complete with a video on how to fit the kit, and a review of the results are going to have to come later on. Now, I've been receiving quite a lot of comments about Norton again. It's an ongoing story, and the longer it runs, the more maggots crawl out of the flesh of the story. I think everyone seems to be pretty much in agreement of the fact that Stuart Garner is a despicable individual with no morals whatsoever. Initially, this story was one of mismanagement, which turned into a story of a very greedy man that's prepared to do pretty much anything it takes to swell his bank account and rip people off in the process. But as time's gone on, I've started to realise that there's more to the guy than even that. His personality is one of sort of spiteful malevolence, a desire to not just rip people off, but in the process do as much harm as he possibly can. He is, at long last, being investigated by the pensions authorities, but that took some doing. It took a public outcry before they actually instigated that investigation. And I do think there's a little bit more to this than the guy just having a charmed life. It seems to me that there is a degree of protection afforded to him. Now, granted, the government has bigger things to worry about at the moment, but for quite some time now, MPs have been shouting out for a public inquiry into the government's dealings with this guy, and how millions of pounds of government and public funding were handed over to a man with the reputation that Stuart Garner has. But as yet, there is still no commitment from the government that they're going to look into it. It's been posited to me in the comment sections of other videos on this subject that people have been given backhanders, or that maybe Stuart Garner has some black on certain government ministers that aided him. Or perhaps the current government is just downright embarrassed by the fact they were taken in by the guy. Knowing Stuart Garner's character, I think there's a good possibility that all of the above may apply. And on top of that, there's been some recent whispers that Stuart Garner had a pre-existing relationship with BDO, the administrators that are currently in the process of consolidating what's left of Norton motorcycles. Apparently, they have been involved in the same proceedings with other companies that Garner's owned, a situation that has, shall I say, raised some eyebrows. I believe the deadline set for selling Norton motorcycles off does expire this month, and there were apparently over 20 different companies interested in buying Norton, and this was reduced to a short list of 8 companies. Now, one of the contenders was a company called Kinetic. They already own the rights to market Nortons in Southeast Asia, and it was considered for some time that they were the favourite runner for taking Norton on. But while doing their due diligence on the viability of buying Norton, it was discovered that the situation wasn't quite as cut and dried as it first appeared. For a start, the Norton name is not exclusive. Over the years, licenses have been granted all over the world, and so the territory granted by buying Norton motorcycles might not be as large and as lucrative as they would have liked. Then of course on top of that we've got Stuart Garner himself, who recently changed the name of another business entity that he owns from Norton Motor Cars Limited to Norton MC, an entity with a name that can easily be confused with Norton Motorcycles and can easily be utilised to undermine Norton Motorcycles. Now, at the same time, he installed his wife as the head of Norton MC, but it doesn't take a genius to work out that his wife is a puppet and Mr. Garner himself will be the puppeteer. This move by Garner serves only to dilute the value of Norton Motorcycles even further than it already has been. If Kinetic were to buy Norton Motorcycles, they would most certainly want ownership of Norton MC as well, because they wouldn't want Garner in control of a business that could cause them problems. Because they know, as we all do, that Garner himself would do everything he possibly could to make life difficult for them. That is, I'm afraid, just the kind of guy that he is. Now, the logical solution to this would also be to buy Norton MC, which I'm sure Mr. Garner would be quite happy to sell to them, and is probably in part his motivation for making the move that he's made. But I doubt very much he would be prepared to sell it for pocket change, even though on the face of it it's a worthless company. Now, if that wasn't enough to put Kinetic off for good, Garner had one more maggot-ridden ace to play. He has a reputation for running companies into the ground until they go into liquidation. He also has a reputation for asset stripping when the writing's on the wall, and it would seem that Norton Motorcycles hasn't escaped that behaviour. Just a little more than a month before the receivers were called into Norton Motorcycles, Stuart Garner made a trip to China. He met up with the CEO of a company called Jinyang, a Chinese motorcycle and motorcycle engine manufacturer, well known apparently for making small capacity commuting machines and engines for the domestic market. Now, there have been rumours circulating about this for a few weeks, but there was no confirmation that it had actually happened. That is, until just a few days ago, when Jinyang themselves admitted that while Mr. Garner was there talking to them, he just happened to sell them Norton's 961 engine, along with all the rights and tooling required to build it. Now, I'm presuming that Jinyang know that they've bought a can of worms. This engine was actually designed and built by Stuart Garner's American predecessors. Now, when Garner bought Norton, he was well aware that this engine hadn't completed development. It still required a substantial amount of money spending on it to make it a power plant fit for purpose. But Mr. Garner wasn't particularly worried about it being fit for purpose, and he just put it into production anyway. Customer satisfaction not really been something that he was interested in. Jinyang obviously have the financial resources to sort this engine out and make it viable. And despite the underhand circumstances by which they've come in possession of it, they have been very quick to point out that the transaction was legal, above board, and that they now own the 961 engine. Something which, once again, seriously dilutes the value of Norton Motorcycles, and to that end, Kinetic walked away from the deal. Interestingly, no one seems to know what happened to the proceeds of this engine sale to Jinyang. But if you were given 3 guesses, I bet you wouldn't have to use them all up. Now, that's not the end of the story, and really all the comments that I've been receiving over the last couple of weeks relate to an Indian company, TVS, that is rumoured to be looking to buy Norton Motorcycles. Now, neither TVS or BDO, the Norton administrators, will confirm or deny this possible transaction that's under negotiation. But Bloomberg have reported that they have it on good authority that it is. TVS is India's 3rd largest motorcycle producer, and it's obvious from their portfolio that they are itching to get into the larger capacity prestige motorcycle brands. India is currently the world's largest motorcycle producer, but its fortunes have changed over the last couple of years, with the Indian motorcycle market recently shrinking. Now, various sources state that this is not a permanent state of affairs. New emissions regulations are about to come into force, and it's considered that the downturn in motorcycle sales is due to prospective customers waiting to see if they can snag a bargain with the residual stocks of non-compliant machines. Personally, I think that's a non-starter, because what the manufacturers will do is they'll just export them to countries that don't have emissions regulations. TVS's offerings mainly being aimed at the budget market. That would make the most sense rather than taking a hit on the domestic market. Whatever the reasons are, TVS has seen, like a lot of other manufacturers, a 40% drop in market value over the last 18 months or so. And it could just be that adding a premium named string to their formerly budget bow might help pull them out of the doldrums, and that's where NORTON Motorcycles comes in. TVS have already collaborated with BMW motorcycles on the Apache RR310, a model which has apparently proved to be very popular, and it pulls them up into the premium bike market and away from the budget commuter market. Indian riders are becoming more sophisticated in their tastes. The run-of-the-mill scooters and licensed copies of old Suzuki's, Yamahas and Hondas from the 1980s and 1990s no longer cut the mustard. Now, names like Norton, Triumph and Royal Enfield obviously have huge meaning to the Indian bike riding public. The Triumphs are considered too expensive. The Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 is already the world's third best selling motorcycle. And so, if TVS want to move up in the rankings in India's market, buying the Norton name would make perfect sense. What I wouldn't like to see is TVS simply renaming all the current models under the Norton name. That would be a travesty, but I don't think that's the game that they're playing. TVS want to break into the mid-range premium market, and I think that's an excellent move. Putting aside the likes of the Dominator and the Commando, acquiring the Norton Atlas range of motorcycles would, without a doubt, be a major game changer in the Indian market. Bearing in mind Stuart Garners' smoke and mirrors approach to marketing, we don't really know just how complete these bikes were. But from TVS's point of view, if these bikes are a viable option, and if they can build them at a more competitive price than Norton proposed, these bikes could challenge the likes of the Royal Enfield Interceptor on equal terms both at home and abroad. I for one would much prefer to see the Norton name go to India than to China. The Indians have a respect for branding tradition that the Chinese will never understand. Exactly what's going on between BDO and TVS at the moment is a bit of a secret, but there obviously is something going on. Whether TVS is able to knock out a deal that suits them or not, we're going to find out in the next few weeks. And if it does come off and TVS get the recipe right, I'm going to be one of the first people in line for a new Atlas. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video and helping to support my channel. I do hope that you found this video useful and that you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you are subscribed, please hit the notification button, that way you can be informed whenever I upload a new video. I will of course be back on Friday, so until then, if you have to ride, please ride carefully, and I'll see you soon.